Guess who's back?
It is October 9th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network. Streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us streaming our audio on our network at www.ltnradionet.com. And of course, we are streaming live here on Facebook. We will look for your comments on Facebook as well. And we're hoping to get a little interaction because I got something I want to give away, and we're going to do it not by phone. We're going to do it by Facebook. So we'll see how that goes. I am John Kane. I am your show's host and producer. I've got Matt Hill on the board here joining us for the show.
How's it going?
I've got Jake Proud manning our cameras for both our Facebook live stream and our YouTube post of the show later on. And, of course, Jake works with me in producing other videos. We're going to do one this week, too, on racism, by the way. So welcome, Jake, as part of the group here and part of what we're doing here. I also want to thank Kelly McMillan. She is the studio engineer who put all of our equipment together, and I appreciate that immensely. A couple of things. It's always fun. I've had an interesting night already. I did a Skype interview just before we went live with the show, and managed to dump a pop over as Matt walked in the room, and so we're fumbling with fingers and wires and everything else, but we're
sticking to everything.
Yeah, sticking to everything. Yeah. Hey, look, I got a couple of things I'm going to talk about. Obviously, it is Indigenous Peoples Day, or in many places still celebrating it as Columbus Day. A lot of activity in different places. I understand there was a bit of some protests at Columbus Circle. The governor of the state of New York was down there participating in the parade, completely mischaracterizing, Columbus and who he is, who he was, and what he represents. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I don't want to beat this thing to death, and nor do I plan to spend the rest of my life trying to topple statues. But I will use the opportunity when people want to talk about Columbus to talk about some of the issues that we face as Native people, not just issues that we faced, 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago, but the issues we're still facing. What I would consider to be essentially an ongoing genocide in many ways. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that. I also want to talk about Andrew Cuomo. Finally, I think he's finally starting to wear thin on the people of Niagara Falls, and we're going to talk about. Yeah, and I'm not even going to call it a faux pas or a mistake. I'm going to say he finally spoke his mind and told people in Western New York how he really feels about them, and we're gonna go through that a little bit and finally try. Maybe it's Cuomo that's going to help us reach the people in Western New York, because it just seems like he's had them over a barrel here for some reason. I don't know. I don't know. Oh yeah, barrel, Niagara Falls. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Want to do a couple of announcements. The Native American Music Awards is this weekend. That's going to be October 14th at 7 p.m. Look, if you can't make it to the event, and it is at the Seneca Niagara Casino, you can actually watch this thing on live. If you go to www.singlefeathermedia.com/live. That's, again, one word, singlefeathermedia.com/live. You can go there today and register to watch this thing, and it'll be a broadcast live streaming on this website. Again, www.singlefeathermedia.com/live. You can register for it today, and then you can watch the awards. I plan to go. I look forward to these things because it is really an opportunity to see many Native musicians gathered in one place at one time, something that we rarely get a chance to do. We've all got our local favorites and the ones who either maybe were local and not so local anymore. Murray Porter comes to mind. And we're lucky when we get a chance to spend some time with any of these Native performers. But this is one of those rare chances to have a bunch of them come to town, and they have returned the event to the Seneca Niagara Casino, which I think is the proper venue for it. And I know this is an awards ceremony that does recognize some of the premier Native artists, not all of them. And again, I know there's a lot of awards ceremonies out there, a lot of associations, and this is one that's been around for a while, and I really support them. And I know they've been working a little bit closer with the Seneca Nation over the years. The Senecas have hosted these awards ceremonies for over a decade now, and I'm glad to see them doing it. And so I look forward to this event coming up this Saturday. So again, October 14th at 7 p.m. at the Seneca Niagara Casino, and you can watch it by going to singlefeathermedia.com/live. Register to stream the awards show. There's some pretty. It should be a pretty good show. So I look forward to it. Look, the other thing I wanted to mention was we had a fire that took place on our territory on the October 5th, early morning hours, an electrical fire, and this wasn't an old home. This was a home that it's a home that doesn't look much unlike mine, the one that I live in. So, and this thing went up, and nobody was injured, but it was a complete loss. They are having a fundraiser Saturday, October 22nd through the 21st through the 22nd. Is that what do I have that right?
That's the way it was written.
2 days, okay. Anyway, Saturday, October 21st. It starts at 12 p.m. at the Cattaraugus Reservation Volunteer Fire Department on the Cattaraugus territory, and they're going to have some of the standard fare, Chinese auction, basket raffles, that kind of thing. And I wish that you would come out, and if not participate, you can actually make a contribution, and you can reach out to I think Marissa Printup up at Tuscarora Woodworks.
Yep.
You can reach her at Tuscarora Woodworks, make a contribution. These guys are trying to recover essentially all that's been lost, which is all that's been lost. So again, support Joy Redeye and Jojo Printup. With this thing. Look, I have to talk about this thing in a little bit different way too. Beyond this, what could have been a very tragic event, we could have had a loss of life, but it relates back to a couple of the articles that have been released in the Niagara Gazette relating to the Niagara Falls Police and of course the Seneca Niagara Casino. There was an article that was out where the chief of police from the Niagara Falls Police Department was suggesting that the patrons of the casino are at risk because the Seneca Nation does not have a full-time 24-hour police presence with shooter protocols and all kinds of other stuff. And of course, this guy even cited the shooting in Las Vegas as if the Niagara Falls Police was somehow capable of handling, a tragedy like that. I mean, there's something that is exploitive, opportunistic, and just flat out wrong in what this article represented. And one of the things they kept insisting was because the Seneca Nation no longer has the state police there, that they only have the police from Niagara Falls show up when they have like a trespassing or some sort of a theft or something like that, and they haven't come to terms with having a full-time police presence there. And I'm not sure that's even the direction the Seneca Nation wants to go. I mean, I think that the idea of the Senecas creating their own and building up their own better security forces or security presence there, security guards and whatever. I don't know that we need to have a police presence there. And I say that because everybody's assuming that model of the cop with the gun and the club is something that we need to have. And again, with all of that police training and all that other stuff and missing the fact that we're not them, that we're somebody different. And it kind of brought it back to life to me back here on our territory, because the Seneca Nation doesn't have a police force here. They have marshals, which were kind of written into their constitution that they voted in back in 1848. And their jobs are to be vigilant and to be peacekeepers and offer some level of service to the people. And so when I look at what transpired with this fire that happened, it was because the Seneca Nation has a marshal service, or this force, if you want to call it that, making the rounds on the territory that they just happened to see fire coming from this house. It was in the middle of in the night. It was early morning. So they saw the fire. They actually went to the house and saved those people's lives. Now, you can say what you want, but there was no police involved. This was a uniquely Seneca agency, if you want to call it that, I guess, that provided the necessary service to save those lives. And and if it weren't for the fact that the Senecas have this, and then no, they aren't deputized police forces. They aren't sheriffs. They aren't state police. They aren't county. They're a Seneca Nation presence whose job it is to help maintain peace in the territory and provide service to the people. And they indeed did so that night. So when I listened to a police chief in Niagara Falls making really kind of a bold statement to say that the patrons and the employees of the Seneca Niagara Casino are somehow at risk because they aren't there or because the state police aren't there. Well, I don't agree. I think the Seneca Nation is quite capable of, with its own personnel, being vigilant and addressing issues. Look, there are some things that are well out beyond what can be prepared for. And when I think about what took place in Vegas, obviously Vegas has all kinds of security protocols, but they were incapable of handling somebody on a 32nd floor taking shots at a concert. And again, I'm not berating the police or anything else that I don't know how you could have prevented something like this other than making it so there's no automatic weapons and that kind of stuff. I mean, but in terms of somebody who wants to do somebody that kind of harm, look, I don't think the Seneca Niagara Casino is at any great risk of certainly far less a risk than many other places in the United States. And I say the same thing. My son was actually a marshal here in Seneca Territory, and I know he got to witness some things and he could get down on it. And I said, look, you still have to remember, this isn't as bad as it is out there. I mean, no matter what you have to deal with here to help keep peace, we don't have the level of crime. We don't have the murders, and we don't. And even when we face issues with substance abuse and even some of the domestic violence stuff, it is still much. It is not nearly as bad as it is in many other areas of the United States. And I say that I for anybody for law enforcement from a jurisdiction like Niagara Falls to step up and condemn the Seneca Nation's preparedness, when I know the crime rate in Niagara Falls, it's like, who are you saying is at risk? So I had to say that out there, and I'm not trying to really berate the Niagara Falls police or the police chief, but I just think he was weighing in such a way that I thought was uncalled for and unnecessary. So I wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Matt, but I mean, it is pretty. I was impressed that the Seneca Nation marshals here were able to perform the way they did and really help save the lives of these two people who lost their home.
And it sounds to me like Niagara Falls is looking for a way to pay for their police department. I mean, they got enough crime going on in Niagara Falls as it is. Why aren't they out enforcing it there in their own? Because it's on their dime. That's why.
Well, and here's the sad part about that is the Seneca Nation has put the offer out there to come to the table. Let's talk about it. But we still have this
they pull back
barrier from from Niagara Falls, and it's funny. I've been going back and forth quite a bit over the last week or two, and obviously I wrote a piece that was in the Gazette. And I've been on a couple of Facebook group pages to engage some of the folks from Niagara Falls, and I've gotten involved with some of the political folks up there in these debates. Some of them who are clearly aligned with Deister and hoping that the governor is successful at winning in arbitration and getting the Senecas to cough up $100 million or $200 million a year to the state so they can trickle some back to Niagara Falls. But the governor kind of tipped his hand a little bit this week, and he was in Batavia doing another one of his publicity stunts where where he's bragging about how much he cares about Western New York because he's going to put $10 million into Batavia for some sort of village restoration thing. Well, one of the local news affiliates asked Cuomo the question, well, would you consider offering Niagara Falls some financial help because of their budget problems? And Cuomo said, well, that wouldn't be fair. And he was really kind of smug about it. He says, well, it wouldn't be fair to help them. When we get paid, they get paid. Maybe they want to help. Maybe they want to make us whole with his shortcomings.
He was pretty smug about that.
Well, not only smug, he laughed about it. And then he actually laughed. And I tell you, I saw the feedback in Niagara Falls, and they were pissed. Yeah. Those people were pissed because they felt like that Cuomo absolutely dissed them. And and the crazy part is, I've been telling these folks all along, the governor's playing you folks. Yep. And
he was like, what do you want me to do about it, right?
He really took this smug attitude to say, well, that wouldn't be fair for me to help Niagara Falls. Here he's dumping $10 million into Batavia and listing a whole bunch of things, including Guandry, he said was on the list, right? Yep. So he's throwing money around, and he's making it sound like he's writing it out of his own checkbook or something, like he's personally responsible. And here's where I got to get back to, and I know I talked about this a little bit on the last show, but I got to talk about it again. Here's what Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca, and perhaps many of the people in Western New York just aren't paying attention to. For Niagara Falls to be, screaming about the sky falling because $11 million, because they have an $11 million shortfall in their budget, because they wanted to patch that budget with Seneca gaming revenue, which wasn't what they were supposed to be doing with it. But they're crying about this, and they're hoping that the governor is going to be able to squeeze the Senecas for money. But let's do the math here. The state has gotten $1.5 billion out of the Senecas over the last 14 plus years. $1.5 billion. $400 million of that has come back. $250 million to Niagara Falls, and Salamanca has gotten a pretty good chunk, and then Buffalo. But out of $1.5 billion, only $400 million has come back to Western New York in terms of this revenue sharing plan. What seems to be getting missed is that $1.1 billion is leaving the area. Look, Niagara Falls, if you don't understand the damage that taking $1 billion out of Western New York is doing, and you're going to sit there and lobby and hope that the governor can continue to take $1 billion, over $100 million a year out of the region, so you can get trickled back, $10 or 11 or $12 million. You're rooting for the wrong team. You're just rooting for the wrong thing. The governor has over-publicized and publicized and over-publicized the Buffalo billion, which has turned into being a complete debacle for the most part. And who knows when $1 billion will ever really have made it back to Western New York as part of the governor's Buffalo billion. But I'll tell you, you want to know a Buffalo billion? I'll tell you what a Buffalo billion is. It's the $1 billion that left the region. It's the $1 billion that the state pocketed from Seneca Gaming. Now, that left the region. It left the economy. It left the local economy. Oh, yeah, the governor's going to do a couple of publicity stunts where he says, I'm going to throw $1 million at this town or that town. And he's never going to say, look, I can do this because we've been raping the Senecas for 15 years. If you're in Niagara Falls, Buffalo, or Salamanca, and if you don't understand what having $120 to $200 million a year more in the region, and when I say more, meaning the Senecas hang on to that. Because where do you think the Seneca spend the money? Where do you think Seneca Gaming spends its money? Where do you think the Seneca Nation spends its money? Where do you think the Seneca people spend their money? Where do you think the Seneca employees spend their money? Where do you think the Seneca vendors spend their money? Yeah, you're pissing and moaning about $11 million or $12 million in revenue that's going to trickle back after the state's already taken $100 million per year, but not understanding the adversity that $100 million leaving the area represents. It shouldn't take an economic genius to figure this out. And of course, the Niagara Falls police chief will, he'll go on record saying how dangerous it is, that the Senecas don't have Niagara Falls police presence there. But the Senecas have said, rolled out the carpet, said, let's meet, let's talk about service agreements. Let's talk about some other programs we can do together. Hey, maybe it's not going to be $12 million. But it might be 4 or 5 or 6. And you know what? If that $100 million to $200 million that was going to Albany doesn't go there, you're going to see the benefits of it because it's still going to get spent here. And I'm not saying the Senecas are going to spend every dime, but if that money's not leaving the area, it stimulates the economy. I mean, the Senecas do plenty for the economy already. And again, that is not being talked about enough. $120 million a year in salaries and wages. Over $100 million in vendor contracts and services. Those are all jobs. There's money that they've put into any number of things that have been well outside the revenue sharing provision. And yet when the Senecas tell Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca, look, we're not paying the state anymore, but you're welcome to come meet with us and let's talk about some things we can do. We still plan to be good neighbors, just not so much with Albany. It just doesn't make sense to send that kind of revenue. Now, when the governor makes his smart ass comments about, well, maybe Niagara Falls will help us make us whole. Look, let's be clear. The governor's been made whole. And I want to clarify so you know what I mean here. I mean, the governor hasn't lost any money on revenue, even if the Senecas aren't paying. And let me explain. He's making gaming revenue. He's making it from racetracks. He's making it from other casinos. The fact that this thing is termed out for 14 years, after 14 years, there's a reason it termed out in 14 years. There's a reason that the Pataki administration, when they negotiated with the Senecas, that it had a 14-year term to it. And that reason was because the state planned on getting involved in gaming. And they did. They got involved in gaming even during the so-called exclusivity period. They built up, slot parlors in 3 of the racetracks right in the exclusivity zone. They used the Seneca Nation to learn the gaming industry, even for those slot parlors. But beyond that, they used the Seneca Nation to learn the gaming industry and to soften up their constituencies and their legislators so they could ultimately pass a congressional or a constitutional amendment so they could do gaming themselves. The governor has plenty of gaming money coming into him. He's got millions, hundreds of millions coming in off of lotteries. He's got money coming in from Hamburg Fairgrounds. He's got money coming in from Batavia Downs. He's got money coming in from Finger Lakes.
And what was that supposed to be for?
It was supposed to keep property taxes down. No, Niagara Falls. It was supposed to be for education. No, I mean, but property taxes is education sometimes. You know what I'm saying? No, I mean, because that's where.
No, I meant the lottery and.
Oh yeah, all of that stuff.
But
even the casino revenue was supposed to be some of that. It was supposed to help with education. And how's it New York doing on that education front, folks? Where does New York State rank in terms of quality education?
Look at the city of Buffalo.
Yeah, well. So, I mean, the governor's got money coming in. Look, his casinos aren't doing as well as they thought. In fact, one of the estimates I saw suggested that the 3 casinos that will have been open this year, which is the Rivers Casino out in Schenectady, or is it 2 Rivers? I don't know. But Rivers Casino in Schenectady, the Del Lago out near Rochester, and the one down in Tioga County, Tioga Downs. Those 3 casinos, they're saying that those things are going to miss their marks by almost $200 million. But you know what? The state didn't invest a dime in those casinos. Just like they didn't invest a dime in the Seneca Niagara Casino or the Buffalo Creek Casino or the Seneca Allegheny Casino. All the state does is get free money. Free money because they didn't give up a damn thing for it. They sure didn't give up any exclusivity. And I've been through that a bunch of times, so I'm not going to belabor that point again. But I'll tell you, the state, any market share the Senecas lost, the state still picked it up.
They got $40 million coming in to municipalities, 75 municipalities out of the state funds that Cuomo's talking about here, and the Hollywood Theater is getting not the Village of Gowanda,
just the theater,
$324,000. It's been what 20 years that they've been renovating.
Yeah, they've been renovating that forever. Yeah. Yeah, look, and I'm not even going to get into the wisdom of where that money goes, but what I will say is this is not just money that the governor just pulled out of nowhere. He's been pulling over $1 billion out of Seneca Gaming the state has for over 15 years, for over 14 years. I mean. And I just don't understand how these economic wizards, these guys who are going to craft budgets for an entire city like Deister or Brown or even Smitty, how are you not understanding that loss of revenue that gets sucked out of those casinos, out of this region and goes to Albany, even if it trickles back for the Hollywood Theater, or the village of Batavia, it's still not compensating for the loss of that revenue. The fact that people are spending their money and it's leaving the area.
I just say when they get into the parking lot at the Racino.
Yeah, I mean they're probably gonna throw a bunch of money on the
restore Batavia down,
or or I don't know. I mean, I just don't understand how people aren't getting it. And when I hear the smugness coming out of the governor to say, well, maybe Niagara Falls will make us whole. Look, you haven't lost a dime, mister. The state has made up plenty of money in gaming without investing a dime. They've got three casinos that are state licensed. They've got, I think, 11 or 14 racetracks that are pulling in revenue for the state that they didn't put any money into. And they're still getting money from Oneida and Mohawk territories.
And a lottery terminal on every corner and every bar.
Every bar, convenience store, bowling alley, you name it. I mean, for this governor to suggest that somehow he's lost money. Yeah. And I'll tell you, he's actually taken money out of Niagara Falls, even on the gaming revenue side, because when the governor started putting up those dumping slot machines into those racetracks, it cut down the amount of revenue that went to Albany from Seneca Gaming, not percentage wise, but the total revenue, because the market share got swallowed up, and that meant that Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca lost money, because there was a time that it was almost like it was like $180 million a year, a couple of years. And then it started dropping off. The gaming market got saturated and the economy tanked a little bit. But if the Senecas didn't lose some of that market share to those racetracks, Niagara Falls would have gotten more money during those years. And I don't think you guys, maybe now the governor's starting to say some foul stuff about you, maybe you're finally going to get it. Look, we're at the bottom of the hour. We'll take a break here.
I got to play this. It's coming.
What? All right. You bet. Got to.
Yeah.
Back in Spain 500 years ago, old Chris Columbus lived. Told Isabella that the world was round. She thought he'd flipped his lid. He bugged the queen so much she finally said, okay, I'll give you 3 ships and some men. He said, I'll find a brand new route to India. Read it, I soon be home again. In 1492, who found who? 1492, who found? Welcome all your tired and weary travelers. And old Chris gave out new names. But this ain't India, we are not Indians. To this day it's still the same. 1492, who found who? 1492, who found?
You got it. Who found who? Well, like I said, Columbus was lost. And I think this is what kind of gets missed in all this stuff. So we'll get into it a little bit. But first, let me go and thank my sponsors: Ross and Holly John and the RJE Family of Businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, my good friends Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped this program continue to educate, entertain, and inform for the last 7 years. I thank all of you for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. And I want to thank CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcast of this program as well. I want to thank Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying Let's Talk Native on their networks. And I want to thank all of you who share the show. And when I say share the show, I know it's being shared as a Facebook live stream. I know my wife shares a bunch of shares the live stream to a bunch of other sites, and as others are as well. So I thank all of you who are doing that. And of course, you can share it not only as the live stream, but we repost. The show gets posted as a was live show afterwards, and of course we repackage it up on our Let's Talk Native TV YouTube channel, and then you can catch it that way. Of course, we also repost or post the audio up on SoundCloud, and I try to put those links up. I put it up a bunch of different ways, and maybe somebody said, "Geez, how many different ways he's going to put that show up there?" But it's so you can pick and choose however you want to listen to the show or watch the show, and
not everybody's got a data plan that can support that.
Exactly.
Watching a video, the audio is available, 4 or 5 different ways.
And YouTube is a really a crystal clear way of catching the videos afterwards, and of course we've been doing some YouTube videos, and obviously with today being Indigenous Peoples Day / the formerly known as Columbus Day, the last video Jake and I worked on was my video on Columbus Day. I'm not going to reiterate during this program all the things that I brought up in that video, but I encourage you to go to Let's Talk Native TV. That's our YouTube channel. It'll be one of the last videos up there. It's clearly marked. Jake does a good job putting the graphics up, so it's about Columbus Day. But take a look at it. Nothing I said in there is untrue. Everything is true, and
documented by him himself, right?
This is what people don't realize. Even as I listen to NPR and all of these other news programs that mention the controversy about celebrating Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day or vice versa, as I listen to how the media still soft shoes and softens the blow on Columbus, they don't talk about the atrocities they committed. They all give the impression that he just happened to usher in what would be the genocide. No, he was personally responsible for atrocities that are, when you're talking about mutilation and disfigurement and cutting off limbs and ears and noses and just mutilating people's faces and bodies and forcing them to to gather gold or anything else of wealth, otherwise they're going to face this kind of burning people. He would actually hang and burn people at the same time. They were feeding body parts to their dogs, including killing babies and feeding them to their dogs. This is stuff that Columbus was personally responsible for. So this isn't just about a genocide that would follow Columbus's discovery. It
was a precursor to the stuff that was coming.
Well, and actually Columbus actually did things that were heinous even by the standards of that day. He and his brother would go back to Spain in chains in one of the last voyages, and then get pardoned by the king and the queen. But there were people who witnessed some of what Columbus was involved in, including the sex slave trade. He boasted about how popular it was to bring a 9 or a 10-year-old girl back to the Spanish gentlemen that wanted to have sex slaves. This is the kind of, this was never okay. It was just never okay. And I don't care, if people try to attribute this to the doctrine of, Christian discovery and the doctrine of Christian domination. It's still heinous, atrocious, behavior that was never okay. And, and so when I hear, Steve Inskeep on NPR suggesting that Columbus somehow merely ushered in what would be genocide, instead of holding him accountable. And again, like Matt said, we know this because these guys were arrogant about what they did, and they wrote it down. Columbus wrote this stuff down. His men wrote this stuff down. The priests and the pontiffs, the holy men from the Catholic Church who witnessed some of this stuff, they saw the brutality, and they didn't necessarily support what he was doing, and they documented. This is all stuff that we're not just making this stuff up, and this isn't something that somebody discovered recent evidence of. Columbus's journals have been available all the time, but there's been a choice to create a false narrative about who Christopher Columbus was, and that's where and that's why we still have 5-year-olds being taught that somehow Columbus discovered he was a brave explorer. No, he wasn't. He wasn't an explorer.
That was part of my discussion on the way to work this morning. The guy writes me, he's about my age, and we were saying, or he asked me, he said, well, how come it was so different when we were in school? How come they didn't tell us anything about like that? And I said, well, one major difference is the internet.
Well, and we've gained a voice.
Yeah.
Because of the internet, partially, but we're more educated. We know how to research with the internet, and even beyond this. Some of this Columbus stuff has been coming out in drips and drabs over the last several decades. I mean, actually, I take it back. During the 500th anniversary of Columbus back in '92, this is when our people globally, I mean indigenous people in South America too, really started saying, we're going to tell the truth about this guy.
Yeah.
So since 1992, there has been a resurgence of the information that even was available then, but is certainly more available now.
Well, I was even saying that just reflective of what our textbooks really, cover. They sugarcoated the whole thing and made us think that was, even like the land takeover was just, okay, yeah, here you go, come plant yourself.
Well, did you see that post in the Canadian textbook? Did you see that one?
Yeah, I did see that.
There was actually a passage in a textbook for children, elementary school in Canada. It said that the First Nations, that's how you knew it was a Canadian textbook, the First Nations people welcomed the Europeans and gave them a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like
made way for them.
Made way. We just kind of got out of their way. We weren't forced away. We weren't killed with smallpox blankets. No, we weren't murdered or had our lands exploited. We just made way for them. We just gave them space. We just gave them room to stretch out.
Smiling.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the textbooks characterize it. But Matt, you raised an interesting issue because of somebody who you saw who said, look, I'm tired of hearing all this Columbus stuff. Yeah, he did all this bad stuff and everything else. And but what have we done? And so before I get into the meat of that conversation, I want to say, look, there are many of us who do know the atrocities that Columbus committed, but there are still many, many, many people who don't. So part of the reason every year we're going to raise this issue is because there are still millions of people who just don't know this stuff. There are still millions of people who don't know that Columbus never stepped foot in North America. So when I hear Andrew Cuomo suggesting that Columbus ushered the way for the immigrant population of North America, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Certainly not in any way directly, and he certainly didn't create some sort of Italian imprint on the continent. He sailed for Spain. Ironically, all of those everything south of the United States was and in fact much of the United States too was part of Spanish colonies. All this discussion over immigration is about half of the country hating on Latin America, hating on the very colonies that they're going to have a holiday for Columbus over. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So I want to say that this is part of the reason we bring this stuff up. But to answer the question that you saw posted, what are we doing to correct not just the narrative, but what are we trying to do to do the right things? What are the positive things our own people are doing to secure our future, to do what's good for our own people? That
was a suggestion. Instead of posting the negative things that Columbus did and all that, super post and share as much as we could of natives doing awesome things. Who's influential in your life? who do you know that is very positive and reflecting all of that stuff? Like say maybe Billy Mills. You know, he accomplished a lot. You know, there's so many different people that contributed to the positive side of
Well, and again, there are a lot of Native
world.
figures that and again, Billy Mills unfortunately had to run for the United States, not for not for the Native people that he comes from. Jim Thorpe is oftentimes regarded as one of the America's greatest athletes. And then we'll see stories of heroism about men who and women who served in the U.S. Armed Forces. But when I think of somebody that I think has been a positive influence and who has really helped lay a foundation that would impact generations of men and women. I think of Louis Hall, the guy who created the Unity flag / Warrior flag. I mean, Louis Hall, who wrote the Warrior's Handbook and a whole bunch of other. I mean, he used to write a newsletter, literally. I mean, on a little manual typewriter, send these things out. The stuff that he published and printed all on his own, and it's just amazing stuff.
The things that I find impressive from him is you see all these posters, all these artwork posters and stuff, and you look at the lettering on there. It's not like he used a printing press. That's all handwritten, hand script, I guess.
And native art has been impacted. When you look at the style of artwork that's on the Unity / Warrior flag, that's a style that has been I don't mean copied in a bad way, but emulated, and it's been he created a whole style of native artwork or art style. I mean, he to me has done so much in terms of again visual art, in terms of. I mean, some of his interviews are just incredible. Some of the stuff that he did, he had a sense of humor. He was, when he was young, he was a wrestler and a bodybuilder. He was a weightlifter. He was a powerful man. But Gunyonge, he was a big part of the land reclamation at Gunyonge in '73. He was a big part of the resurgence of the quote unquote warrior society, and the singing societies that were built up out of that. Louis Hall. Who was known during his time as Gorunyak Daje, he was one of these guys that he wasn't dwelling on the negative. He actually established what the standards should be for us to live our lives, how men should carry themselves. He never made excuses for somebody to be a drunk or a drug addict or anything else. He said, no, that's not the behavior we should have. I mean, when I think about what Louis Hall represented. And yeah, there were some people who were just absolutely against what Louis Hall represented, but he created the resistance movement beyond the AIM stuff. I mean, because AIM was almost like a separate thing, but in terms of seeing this flag internationally, I mean, all over native territory, South America, North America, Central America. I mean, every time you've seen this flag someplace. That's carrying an image that Louis Hall created. And that image was one of unity and of resistance. It was about being proud of who we are as Native people and making sure that we did the things we needed to do to secure our future. So when you first brought up this suggestion that somebody made, and look, I have no problem spending the week running up to Columbus Day just absolutely deriding what a moron Columbus was and what a terrible human being he was. And I'm not going to stop that. I'll do it every year. But through the rest of the year, I think we should spend more time talking up our. I mean, Louis Hall is a guy that obviously impacted. I had the pleasure to know him. I mean, and right now, I mean, he's been. I don't even know how long he's been gone, but he's been gone for a long enough period of time that. Pretty much anybody you see flying a Unity / Warrior flag probably doesn't even know him, but they know his work, they know what he represented, and there are people that I still rely on today, who were strongly influenced. Degarundege, Paul Delarone, Laurent Thompson, Ganazaraga. I mean, when I think about these guys, Francis Boots, when I think about these guys, and how much they were impacted by Louis Hall, and how much they continue to impact others. These are positive people. And I know there's a whole lot of warrior bashers out there who who get bent about this stuff. But I mean, these are the guys that that have been meaningful to me, that help balance me both because of their language skills, their awareness of the culture and the Guyana de Goa, the wampum belts. I mean, some of this stuff. I mean, these are the guys to me that have been the most powerful influences in our territories.
So I guess any natives, whoever you see as your major influence, you should take time to try to promote them and show what their accomplishments were. I mean, that's why we play an hour of native music before the show even starts.
Yep.
I mean, that's a kind of like a weekly way of showing that support for our fellow natives
in that one area.
Yeah,
in that one area.
In music.
Well, and because that music oftentimes does transcend social justice issues, especially, the way some of these guys perform, like Murray. Murray Porter goes directly at contemporary issues, and many of the others do as well. So but you're right. I mean, I think we do need to make sure that even as we're fighting and continue to fight off genocide and the atrocities of the past, or overcoming the historical trauma.
Yeah.
I think we do, and so
I'll take up that better yet, instead of just highlighting, try being one of those ones that are
try to be a positive influence. I mean, I did a Skype thing, like I said before the show here with Hofstra University, and one of the things that there was talk about how Native people promote or try to promote their independence and their autonomy. And the debate, has been served up before that suggests, well, it's because they're only trying to look after themselves. And I said, no, you're not understanding. Part of the reason that we fight for our autonomy and our distinction is because we think that if given the opportunity for us to really engage our own cultural solutions to the very real problems that we face today, we may establish those models that will help everybody else. And the other thing is understanding that our culture is not about self-promotion. It's about relationships. It's about understanding what our relationship is to all of creation, including other people, people who don't look like us necessarily. I mean, the whole idea is, if we don't understand that we as people have to get along, but that the world wasn't placed at our disposal. The world wasn't created for man. And I know that goes against some Christian dogma, but that's the reality. We have to understand that, man, if man wipes himself out, the earth is going to be fine. In fact, the earth will probably be better off without us. We have done some terrible things to each other and continue to do them. We've done terrible things to the planet. We've done terrible things to so many other creatures that are a part of creation that it's almost hard to mention it all. One of the things when people question why is it Native people are so impoverished, what they don't understand is just how disrupted our thousands of years of development, how much fire that came under, and I perhaps not understanding that. Maybe an analogy would be, think about, every once in a while there's a moose that makes it out here to Western New York, and it's a big deal. Why? Because that migratory pattern of that moose has been cut off. It has been wiped out, not just by highways and cities, but by everything. Everything man has done has changed the migratory patterns of all kinds of animals, all kinds of, even birds and fish. I mean, the migratory patterns of fish have been affected by the contamination of water. But when you think about the deer and the moose and so many other of the larger species of animal life that have had their entire migratory patterns disrupted. Well, the same thing goes for us. We weren't nomads, but we did have lives that would change with the seasons. We would, especially as you go farther up north. I think of Attawapiskat, which is a place that it's tough to live at in the wintertime. That's because our people wouldn't have lived there in the wintertime. They would have moved farther down south during the harsher weather. And all of that was changed. Everything that was a part of our economy, for lack of a better word, but our means of survival and sustenance was changed and eliminated. I mean, I think about, who was it, Philip Sheridan, the only good Indian's a dead Indian guy? There's some debate whether he actually ever said that or not, or implied that or whatever. But there's one thing clear that Sheridan was involved in. He was involved in the mass slaughter of the buffalo. He promoted that. He knew that if you could wipe out a species like the buffalo, you could essentially wipe out the native people at the same time, or at least very much control them and change their lives so significantly that you could pacify them. That kind of shows you the mentality that existed with the United States and their manifest destiny and white man's burden, all of that. But I mean, these are the kinds of things that we teach this stuff so people understand what we have to overcome. Then we look to the Louis Halls, the Garunyak Dajes, and the Garundages, and the Ganazaragos. We look to these guys for ways to bring forward from the past a solution for the future. I mean, I think that's what people can get. Well, I mean, again, I mentioned it during the piece that I did for Hofstra before the show. Look, I know people like to weave everything into almost like a Disney version of who we are as people. Make it all about spirituality. Make it all about the Creator. Make it all about the spirits and all about the messengers and all that other stuff. Look, and I'm not gonna get into all of that, but I will say that our culture made sense. It made sense because it was based on nature. It was based on the things that we witnessed. It wasn't based on burning tobacco in the morning. The ceremonies, our lives weren't based on the ceremonies. The ceremonies were a celebration of our lives. We did those festivals, we did those ceremonies to acknowledge what creation was doing for us. We did that to, as a part to teach our own, and we didn't do it so creation would keep doing it. We did it so our young would learn how important it was to acknowledge the power of creation and to acknowledge, how grateful we should be for what the planet has, continues to sustain, how it sustains all of us. And I don't mean all of us as people. Again, I mean all of creation. This is the stuff that I think we have to spend much more time concentrating on. We need to understand. Look, I know we live in a different world right now than 7 generations ago, and for a variety of reasons. Many of those reasons being the decisions that all 7 generations made that lead us to where we're at now. But the fact of the matter is, we still can bring forward those philosophies and those cultural ideals. Look, are we going to sustain ourselves the same way? Well, maybe not. Maybe we are going to have solar panels on our homes. And maybe we are going to, build a home that's different than a longhouse was, 4 centuries ago. But the fact of the matter is, we can bring some of those ideals about community, about family, about relationships with creation. We can bring that stuff forward. And that's the stuff that we need to do. We need to have a different idea. We got to reject this notion of the global economy. One of the things when I talk about even the stuff with Seneca Gaming, trying to make people understand, look, we're your neighbors. We are the ones that you live next to. We are the ones you're going to interact with. Not the guys from New York City and the guys from Albany, who are primarily from New York City. You have to understand that we have to deal with the friendships and the relationships that are closest to us, both the human relationships and the non-human relationships. This isn't spirituality speaking. This is pragmatism. This is about saying and understanding what our lives should be. I mean, Matt, you went to Letchworth, which is just to go to Letchworth State Park, which is a territory of the Senate. It was called the Gardeau Reservation at one time, but it's part of that Genesee Valley, Seneca, homeland. That it's almost a travesty that it's not still predominantly occupied by Senecas, but it is such a beautiful place to go to. I mean, it is so inspiring to see all of the features that and obviously if you only went there for a day, you couldn't even see it all.
We saw quite a bit. They had some construction going on and stuff, but it was interesting to see that the railroad bridge was in operation now. You know, and even I didn't even notice it, but my little guy, he's seen it and he goes, "Hey, that bridge works now." So you know, I took a picture. It had the oil tankers going across it.
Oh, geez. Bomb trains.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a pretty neat place to go. We went into the museum there, and I was able to tell somebody in there looking at pictures of the Thomas Indian School, and I got to tell her a little bit about what the school is about, what it did, and she was like totally blown away. And that kind of stuff is what I appreciate, having spent all the time in the studio here and spending all the time with everybody and learning a lot.
Going to Six Nations and
yeah,
other places.
And being able to, just be able to rattle off stuff and educate people. And she had no idea. She thought it was a good idea that, the school was there to educate us. I said, no, I said it
But that's still the way it's being characterized. I listened to, again, a show on NPR just last week, and they were talking about how they're talking about the Carlisle football team playing against Princeton or something like that, and how Colonel Pratt was propping up those boys and saying, "See, this is how good they can be when they're taught how to be like a white man," and that's still that narrative is still being told even on NPR and some of these other media outlets. It's really it's incredible. So no, I mean, but it's good that you could take your experiences to say to correct that narrative, but at the same time, I don't think people can appreciate the level of contentment that Native people have, even without I guess all of the things that that white people have. I guess I don't know. I think people sometimes don't understand. In my life certainly, and I'm not a guy who has an expensive lifestyle. But I mean, the idea of what you can do with family and your grandchildren and your nieces and your nephews and all that stuff, and I mean, I think life is good.
Real quick, I kind of blew her out of the water. She was talking about the different villages that weren't there because there's a map and it shows all the different villages. She goes, "Yeah, weren't those places where like sacred places here on the territory or on the?" I said, "It was all sacred to us," and she just like, "Wow," it just kind of set her back, and she never really thought about it like that.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, I think we pretty much wrapped it up here, folks. Again, I'm not going to New York this week. I might do. Maybe I'll do a special Facebook stream on Thursday, nonetheless. But we'll be back on Friday, and like I said, Jake and I are going to work on a video. I'm going to address racism. I'm sometimes surprised every day at how very little people understand about what racism actually is. So I'm going to do a video to kind of explain it so people understand the difference between racism and prejudice and bigotry and even racial bias. And so we'll get into that a little bit. So we'll look for that this week, and then we'll see you on Friday. All right. See you then. Yahweh.